Hello, everyone. Welcome to Accelerate Yale's webinar for this evening. We are so pleased to have you join us for Innovating for a Carbon-Free Future. My name is Wendy Maldonado D'Amico. I'm Yale College class of 1993, and I'm director of Accelerate Yale and Yale Angels. Accelerate Yale is a global community of diverse alumni and friends of Yale engaged in innovation, tech, and entrepreneurship. Our mission is to cultivate an active, inclusive ecosystem that thoughtfully promotes meaningful connections and collaborations, while also serving as a bridge between alumni and current Yale students. We'd encourage all of you to drop your names and contact info and LinkedIn into the chat so we can see who's here tonight. Please note that we are recording tonight's session, and all of you as participants will be muted. And we're going to keep this for about an hour, and we'll reserve the last 20-25 minutes for questions. If you have a question that you have for our panelists, please type that question into the Q&A bubbles at the bottom bar. That will help us keep the conversation flowing so that we don't have to dig for your questions in the chat. So it is my pleasure to welcome our speakers for this evening. And what I'm going to do is just introduce each of them by name and company, and then we're just going to go around and have each of them introduce themselves for a few minutes and talk to us about their businesses. So first, I'm pleased to welcome Eric Rubenstein, founding managing partner of New Climate Ventures. Next, we have Stafford Sheehan, co-founder and CTO of Air Company. And finally, we have Brennan, vice president of research and development at Dimensional Energy. So without further ado, I would like to have Eric, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Wendy. So as you introduced your class, I was Yale class of 2004. From Yale, started in I went to business school actually at Temple University and did an international program, studied in Paris, in India, in Philadelphia, where Temple's based, and in Tokyo as part of that program, and then launched into the world where I was in commodities business for 15 years. I started a company called Louis Dreyfus, and then went to Citigroup from there. Been based in Houston for 14 years now. And through that path, found my way into sustainability and into investing in companies that span food tech and climate tech and circular economy and such. And last year left Citigroup to start a fund that is focused on carbon reduction and avoidance. So we're investing in companies very much like Dimensional Energy and Air Company, and have actually invested in both of them. And so it's a pleasure to be here and on a panel with both Brad and Steph.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Eric. Steph, would you please introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. I'm Stafford Sheehan, Chief Technology Officer and co-founder of Air Company. I was a Yale PhD 2015, and I after that, worked in chemical industry for a little bit and started Air Company about 5 years ago in 2017. What we do is we develop technology for carbon dioxide hydrogenation. It means we take green hydrogen that's produced by water electrolysis, we combine that with carbon dioxide in a reactor with catalysts that are kind of the core of our technology. We make the catalysts ourselves, and together with scale-up partners, but they're really the core of our patents and our technology. What we turn the carbon dioxide and water via hydrogen into is oxygen gas and high purity alcohols. We use those alcohols for consumer goods in the near term. So we're probably most well known for our Air Vodka, which is available in New York City at several bars and restaurants in town, and our Air Spray hand sanitizer, as well as Air Perfume, Air Eau de Parfum, our fragrance. But those are just intermediate products as we scale our technology toward driving the cost to produce down to be able to compete with commodities that are made from fossil fuels.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Steph. And last but not least, Brad, please introduce yourself.
I'm Brad Brennan. I'm also a chemist, just like Steph, and I was a Yale postdoctoral scholar at the Energy Sciences Institute from 2012 to 2015. After that, I went to Caltech and did a fellowship there for a few years, and then went into industry as well for a year in the semiconducting area. Got on board with this company a couple years after they started as sort of like their director of R&D, and worked my way through their technology and helped develop the technology that we use now. And our technology is somewhat similar to Staff's, but we focus on different products. We're also taking carbon dioxide obtained from any source, and we react it with hydrogen that's gotten from electrolysis, and we're producing just straight hydrocarbons. And those hydrocarbons are ultra pure, and they can be processed into things like jet fuel, things like plastics with downstream refining. And we can basically do almost, most of the chemicals in the world can be basically based off of precursors that we make. Our technology is also focused on the catalyst that we use. That's our proprietary catalysts. And we have special chemical reactors that we're engineering in order to produce basically the highest quality feedstock from our chemical reactors with the highest efficiencies and carbon utilization. We are focusing on our products as jet fuel, which I know Steph is also interested in as a commodity chemical. And then there are also products that we can make on the way there that are also very high value in comparison. So we can utilize those as revenue as we scale and decrease the cost of our technology as well.
Very interesting. Thank you so much, Brad. So I'm really curious about each of you. How did you kind of go from what you were doing at Yale? Each of you chose your path. I mean, we have 2 chemistry PhDs and we have Eric. I'm curious about how your path evolved from the time that you started at Yale to what you're doing now. And also in a parallel track, how your experience in the business world has evolved from the time that you were at Yale to where you are now. So I'm going to start actually with Brad. Can you tell us a little bit about that path?
Yeah. So when I was at Yale, I was sort of, doing my training. So after my graduate degree at Arizona State, I went to Yale. I was still doing basic sciences. And when I was done with that, and when I started going to Caltech is a very much an applied institution. So they do spin outs from their universities for companies. And I learned a lot about the entrepreneurship there. And became much more interested in carbon dioxide chemistry, which I hadn't done that much of at that point, as well as applied science. Industry was going to be a good fit for me, and I searched, and actually I talked to Staff. Staff didn't have enough money to hire me, but I was actually looking for a position much like the one I have now. I couldn't find it. There were startups out there, but most of them weren't well funded yet. And so I went into industry, and then Staff actually told my boss, our CEO, that he had to hire me. And so Staff helped me get my current position actually. And, the rest is history. When I got in the laboratory, started looking at the technology, I realized I could use every basic science and background that I've been trained for and learned. And I could apply that in something that could turn out to be a commercial product, which is, something that drives me, is actually making a difference. So the drive for sustainability is what really helped me push myself into applied science.
You, Steph? Do you ever think you'd end up in applied sciences and in a startup?
Yeah, so I would say that I was dedicated and still am dedicated to this field, to this using carbon dioxide to produce commodities and fuels. When I was graduating, I saw that there was a lot of talk in the introductions of academic papers about what it would be like to commercialize these things, but nobody had ever actually tried. And the people that had tried really didn't have a pathway to market other than just, it's kind of like develop technology, question mark, question mark, question mark, defeat gasoline. So there wasn't really I feel like a solid commercialization plan out there for businesses in this area. So I rather than going kind of either an academic or a national lab route, I thought that it would be that the way that I could contribute best to this field was in starting a business that would be able to actually, as Brad said, make a difference. Because there are so many positions where you do a lot of good work on good science, as we both did in the Energy Science Institute, but that science is not, it doesn't translate as easily to the real world. And that's, I think, one example, that I mentioned to you all before, is that both Brad and I were electrochemists, pure electrochemists when we were doing the research we did in Yale's Energy Science Institute. And now we're both doing thermochemistry. And when you look at the chemical industry, almost everything is powered by thermochemistry, not electrochemistry. So learning different skill sets that are kind of more applied, but also coming from that background where we did kind of learn the fundamentals, and we know how our electrolyzers work really well.
Excellent. Thank you, Steph. Eric, really curious about your path from Yale to what you're doing now. And it sounds like you actually jumped into the business world. So talk to us a little bit more about your path.
Yeah, so actually when I was an undergrad, I was planning on going into medicine originally. And what pivoted my career really and where I went with everything was a dinner conversation I had with the president of a merchant trading shop, energy trading shop, my sophomore year. And he asked me a question. He asked, why don't Yale students want to go into energy trading? And I said, what is energy trading? The point being that I don't think they know what energy trading is. So why would they go into it? And
right.
Like, tell me what it is. And, maybe that's something that people should be considering. And he told me about it in my sophomore year. And lo and behold, a few years later, I ended up going into energy trading. And what drew me to energy trading versus, say, trading any other thing, equities or bonds or anything else, is that it was a physical commodity. It's something you could touch. It was tangible. You could understand the supply and demand behind it and what was driving the markets. At the end of the day, the commodity itself had to tie back to a price that was associated with our behavior as humans. It wasn't some mathematical formula that was driving based on some theoretical growth in the future or something. It was someone needed something today, or they, there was too much of that thing today. And we're seeing it right now in markets where everything is very expensive and supply chains are tight. And if you understand commodity markets, you understand a lot of what's happening with businesses. And so I guess my interest in investing in companies started with understanding the commodity markets and understanding the drivers of the economics behind businesses in that way, in that very raw form, and then seeing the change that could happen in the world. So as energy cycles came and went, the energy transition emerged and then busted and then reemerged basically. And the bust wasn't so much a bust, because during that bust, you saw Tesla, let's say, emerge. And Tesla, like, seeing one company change the entire landscape of an industry for the better, I think we can argue, it was super impressive. And so now I'm looking at that and I'm applying that sort of logic toward the markets I'm investing in, which are these commodity markets. Really, it's the carbon markets, it's the plastics markets via alternative plastics, so the plant-based materials and chemical recycling and other things. And you can think through what the future looks like based on this thinking of how is human behavior changing, how are us as consumers changing, how are companies changing to adapt to that human behavior, to that consumer behavior. So big corporations setting sustainability goals and abiding by them. And then how does that parlay into the world actually pushing forward and changing for the positive? and what's that look like 5-10 years out, and then you can make decisions in terms of what you want to invest in based on that. So it's kind of anchored, the path was anchored in a conversation I had at Yale, and then the training I had in commodity markets and understanding the world that led to where I am now.
Very interesting. Thank you, Eric. So, so I just want to welcome our moderator to our session. He was stuck in a snarl of traffic in California. And so I would like to now welcome our moderator, Gautam Barua, who is my college classmate, the Yale College class of 1993, the best class ever, just saying. And I would just now like to have Gautam introduce himself for a moment. Please take a couple minutes, Gautam, to give us a quick introduction of yourself, and then I'm going to go off camera and allow you to continue moderating the conversation.
That's great, Wendy. Thank you so much, and thanks all for your patience. It was a little ironic to be stuck in Southern California traffic and seeing all these people emitting carbon all around me as I was late for this call, Tesla's notwithstanding. So yeah, just briefly by way of background, I'll defer to Wendy on the choice of the best class ever, but I'll say we were in the same class at Yale, early 90s, and I had an unusual experience, I think, by most standards, in that I got involved in the environmental scene as a student, helped run YSEC, the Yale Student Environmental Coalition, ran the recycling program, expanded that greatly while I was running it. And then I was a financial aid student, so paid my way through in part by working for David Swenson's team at the investments office all 4 years. And so came out of the gates with this really strong view that environment and investing and capital were going to be really powerful drivers of change and levers of change in our lifetimes. It all kind of culminated in my working with William Nordhaus my senior year and briefly after my senior year on what was then his incipient model of climate and the economy. And as I think most of us on this call probably know, Bill won the Nobel Prize in economics a few years ago for this model that we were building back in the day. So have had this very strong awareness and interest in climate and investing and business over the last, gosh, almost 30 years since college. Have touched on those fields in both focusing on traditional business as well as on climate and sustainability as an investor, advisor, and entrepreneur. Most recently have been making some investments and advising businesses on carbon capture and sequestration while I'm talking to various people about getting involved in a larger in a larger platform for climate investing. So lots of overlap with everybody who's on this call, whose faces I can see, and I'm sure everybody more broadly. So thank you all for joining us. A set of questions as Wendy laid out. We'll go through the questions after you all have a chance to describe your businesses, and then happy to open it up to Q&A, which Wendy will moderate. So I'm assuming that you all haven't shared too much about your businesses yet, and if you have, then I'm happy to jump into the questions.
They already did, G. So you can just jump
So
into
that's perfect.
Yeah. So we just covered the first question, so you can take it from there.
Great. Perfect. So I'm so glad I got to miss the first part. So as we look to the next, so as we look ahead to the next 3 to 5 years, and Eric, you were kind of touching on this, right? That we're at this big inflection point right now. So what are you all most excited about for your businesses and with the market overall? And obviously, 2 of you are coming at this from a different perspective from the third, but would love to hear both the investor's perspective and the operator's perspective. So maybe Steph, you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say in the next 3 to 5 years, there are a handful of real important things that are happening on a policy level and on kind of like, in terms of actual direction of renewable electricity. So there's a big decrease in the cost of renewable electricity, especially spurred on by a handful of deployments that are coming that have already been announced for the next 3 to 5 years. That's the least exciting of the two things that I see kind of coming to drive these businesses, and and especially businesses like ours and Brad's. The most exciting one, I think, is actually probably what's recently happened with sustainable aviation fuel, where there's less than 70 million gallons of it produced, annually, depending on who you ask, but it's in that very, very, very small range. Meanwhile, the EU and several countries have now started to enact legislation that's saying that up to 2% of all of their aviation fuel has to be sustainably derived. So there's this huge the supply-demand crunch that's happening right now in sustainable aviation fuel is something that really, you guys probably know it, Eric and Gautam, probably better than I do, but at least in my, in my experience, when we're the ones that are controlling the supply, or we're the ones that are developing, the supply, and the demand is now literally mandated by law to be, several thousand times what the current supply is, that puts us in a very good position. So I would say, the price of renewable electricity dropping, and then the demand for, sustainable aviation fuel, also sustainable alcohols as well. The shipping industry is gradually, changing their fuel of choice to methanol. So, for us, both the shipping industry and the aviation are things that really excite us. I'd say our focus is more kind of on the aviation side, but these demand increases and with very tight supply for sustainably derived fuels.
I'll go next. I'll follow up on what Steph said. Like, there are a lot of exciting things coming together, and when I say coming together, I mean it's being scaled independently. All these processes that need to happen for a sustainable product to actually be commercialized. Electrolyzers for producing hydrogen are coming down in cost, getting very large in scale. We have technologies like ours and Staff's that are being built up, and then there's going to have to be downstream processes that sort of develop these things into final products and get integrated into the system at scale. And there's lots of companies involved: carbon capture companies, carbon utilization companies. Some of the major chemicals companies are also involved or will be involved. And then again, this is also like happening all around the world. In some places, like Steph said, are being more progressive about how they're planning for this transition. Europe is one of them. There's other countries. Canada has a pretty decent carbon utilization approach in their funding for some of their grants that the government provides to help pilot plants be developed and things like that. But it's basically a giant integration issue of how can everybody scale, but also work together to actually create an efficient set of processes to actually develop a world scale transition necessary. And as Steph said, like, electricity prices are going to be one of them. Like, from electricity, we can produce, anything the world needs. We could capture carbon dioxide and produce any chemical the world wants. We can then use electricity to provide as much water as the world wants, because all you can do is desalinate water from the ocean and stuff like that. So basically, massively building out, the electrical infrastructure for the government help around the world, and then making that all sustainable, renewable. Like, that's going to be also a big push, and we'll see in the next 3 to 5 years, what countries or what regions actually get involved in providing the platform that's necessary for this massive transition.
And the transition that you guys are pointing to is kind of this energy transition that people talk about. And the way I like to think about the world, and I think you guys would agree, is we're at this inflection point where it's not just an energy transition we're talking about anymore, even though that's kind of the parlance that people use a lot of the time. It's actually we're decarbonizing the world. Like we have to decarbonize every industry in the world. And that's kind of the inflection point we're at, where consumers have been drawn to this, right? And we're at the point where Tesla, I'll point to them again, you can buy this amazing car that people love. People made a product that people love that is better for the planet, and people are attracted to that because the quality of the product is fantastic. Air vodka is a great example of a product that people love, that is very good, that is better for the planet. So you can point to these things, and then I'll pull it back to Beyond and Impossible. Like before Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods launched their burgers a few years ago, I wasn't sure that people would adopt a GMO product. It's a genetically modified product, right? It's something that's made in a lab that is then put on people's plates, and people hoarded to it, right? They liked that they were eating something that was better for the planet, and I think arguably better for ourselves, though there's some debate there. So when you see these better products being produced and consumers wanting it, there's just this huge pent up demand for things that are good for the planet, that replace things that we use every day. And we need to decarbonize the construction industry. We need to decarbonize, and that's hard. Creating product for the construction industry that's going to decarbonize it is arguably more difficult to create and scale than create it, because you're talking about steel at that point. You're talking about these really strong products that we've come to use in everything we do, versus say sustainable aviation fuel, where the problem there has been scale, to a large, like Steph alluded to and pointed to directly. But that's because the feedstock that we've been using just is very difficult to scale. You're effectively using agriculture to feed into, you're making biofuels that feed into the system to make that sustainable aviation fuel today. But you can be using carbon dioxide, which we want to get out of the atmosphere. We want to capture off of plants. We don't want it to be emitted into the air. You can use that product, that commodity, and you can turn it into something useful that replaces something that we use every day, like jet fuel, diesel fuel, chemicals, so to replace plastics. So every system that we use in the world needs to change. And that's what's exciting to me. The next 3 to 5 years is going to prove out a lot of these technologies. These products are going to be in market that people want, like carbon dioxide turned into cement, as an example from the construction industry. These sorts of products exist today. They are going to be scaling over the next 3 to 5 years. We're all going to be, as consumers, more in tune with them as we see them scale. And hopefully we'll be enlightened more and more, and share more with our friends that this is actually happening from webinars like these.
And it's a great overview. Thank you. And as somebody who had an Impossible Burger for lunch that I cooked up in the toaster oven, it was way better than the old garden burgers. I can attest to the value of having products that are not only better. I don't know if you all saw, there's a New Yorker article about Impossible Burger a couple of years ago, and the founder of Impossible Burger, Pat Brown, he said that he had thought about how he could make the biggest impact on climate. And he said if we were to switch away from eating beef, that would be the impact. And so that led him down this path of creating Impossible Burger. So maybe in that vein of the Impossible Burger being better than the garden burger, I'd love to hear, again, maybe from the entrepreneurial side first, and then from the investor side, what is the edge you have over your competitors? I mean, there are a lot of people on both sides of the fence here who are jumping into climate, ESG, besides the technologies that you guys are using for converting carbon dioxide into valuable products. I know I have a friend, she started a company that's got a lot of money doing electrochemical conversion. I talked to another company that's using synthetic biology to convert carbon dioxide into ethanol. So there are lots of different players throwing themselves at this. How do you see yourselves advantaged in the space relative to all these competitors? And then Eric, maybe how do you see yourself being able to pick the winners and having an advantage in sourcing the winners?
I'll start out with this because I want to talk about Impossible Foods. Before I accepted my current position with Dimensional Energy, I told my boss I had an interview at Impossible Foods in San Francisco, and I went in there and thought I nailed the interview, and they did not offer me the job for basically product development R&D, which would have been. I'm a foodie, so I wished I could have two jobs at the same time, because that would have been a very fun job to develop food. But now moving on to what my current company does. Our advantage is that we did it before it was cool, so we were ahead of the game on and have kept our eye on the end goal. Our end goal, of course, is a commodity, but along the way you have to fully understand every other product you can make, and you have to have a vision. So a lot of big companies out there, their vision is to make money. Their vision is not to change the world. They want to keep their regular chemical market that they use, let's just say like an Exxon or a Chevron or somebody, like they want to keep everything else going, full steam ahead, and they just want to add something to it. And we want to revolutionize. We want to be able to basically either make them obsolete or force them to use our technology, because it's the only path forward in the long term. Because perhaps at some point in some country, that country will not let them use oil derived products anymore, say the European Union or something like that. And so those two things said, it means that we have a team on our engineering team, our scientific team. Everyone else is focused on the goal. We understand exactly how to get there and what we need to do to get there and the problems to solve. And because we're a small companies, we can do it. We can be nimble. We can be creative. We can try out new things that sometimes is difficult to do at a big corporation where, they have preferred pathways and they want to use preferred technology. We're technology agnostic. We find the technology we need to use, or we develop it ourselves. And we basically just overcome problems as they arise. So we're able to be a lot more nimble than a larger company. And in comparison to other technologies that are out there that are doing the same thing, I mean, it's a big market. So everybody has a piece of the pie, and some people are going to have niches that are different than ours, and they're not going to be competitors. Like me and Steph, we're not competitors. We have different products that can maybe both be made into jet fuel. But overall that market's so big, it's not really a problem if we both enter the market.
Yeah, I can follow that up with, I mean, the different approach to technology give you different integration advantages. I would say, that Brad's technology compared to our technology, they integrate differently into different processes. And so, like, if you have excess waste heat, for example, then maybe dimensional energy's technology may be able to utilize that. Whereas for us, we really are a pure play on a narrow cut. So, like, on a narrow cut of a product, we really focus on making extremely high purity or extremely targeted products, where we actually generate extra waste heat. So, in our next larger plants, we're using our extra waste heat that we generate to turn a turbine to make more electricity. And so there's different integration advantages to the different technologies that are being developed, even when you're working on like two chemical solutions for sustainable aviation fuel. Beyond that, I think one of the big advantages that and this will be the comment that leads into Eric. So I think this is I think one of the big advantages that both Dimensional Energy and Air Company have, is the fact that we are using thermochemistry, in our chemical transformations. And the reason that I think that that's a really huge advantage is because all of the current infrastructure for petrochemicals is using thermochemistry. So we're more compatible with the existing infrastructure. Any thermochemical process is going to be more compatible with the existing infrastructure, because we can go and retrofit reactors. We can we can make minor edits to reactors and then reuse them. We can go in and use the same compressors. We can go in and use the same balance of plant equipment that's currently out there at the scale that we need to get to ultimately. Whereas essentially, for a lot of things like synthetic biology, for pure play electrochemistry, for a lot of these other angles at solving the problem, they have the challenge of having to develop an entirely new infrastructure the size of the oil and gas industry, which is just like the question, the challenge of building another oil and gas industry that's as big as the oil and gas industry is crazy huge. Whereas the technologies like mine and Brad's, essentially we're going out there and we're saying, well, actually we're going to use that same infrastructure and that same type of equipment and those same sorts of things, except we're going to use it to take the carbon from the air, put it in the ground, rather than taking the carbon from the ground and put it in the air.
Interesting. So Eric, as Steph was saying, kind of a good segue to you.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about picking the winners, but I guess as I compare the way that we're looking at markets and the market versus say other funds, I start to think about the breadth of things that we can invest in, but also the narrow focus that we have, which is kind of an oxymoron. But we have a focus on carbon reduction and avoidance, but by having that focus, which is very much in the wheelhouse of removing carbon from the world or avoiding carbon being emitted, that opens up to us being able to invest not just in say climate tech, but also in recycling and in alternative materials and in food tech and in these different areas. So by being able to invest across these different areas, but within that one kind of thesis, it opens up to having a lot of ability and flexibility, but also people wanting you to be invested with them because you actually are focused and know something about what you're investing in to a greater degree than say a generalist fund that's investing in SaaS like software tech and whatnot as a primary objective, and then also kind of goes out and invests opportunistically in these other areas. So there's a lot of funds that are kind of generalists that will make 1, 2, 3, or 4 investments say a year out of, I'll just make up a number. If you're making 100 investments, just to pick a threshold that people can relate to, then maybe they're making between 1 and 4 years. So you're having 1 to 4% of what you're doing every year in that area. We're 100% in that area, but we have that flexibility. So I find that advantageous. And then another thing is we're kind of a startup ourselves. We're early stage fund that's investing in early stage companies, and we're rather small relative to other funds. So if you have too much money to deploy, and this is kind of to the point y'all were making about the major oil companies, they have to spend billions of dollars. If you're trying to spend billions of dollars, you have to go and spend it on scaling renewables like wind and solar, because you need these big projects in order to spend that kind of money. Staff in the round he raised $30 million. Like there's a lot of $30 million you need to spend in order to spend billions of dollars. So realistically, these companies are not going to be startups. They're not going to, and I get that question a lot is, okay, well, why can't Exxon just do this? Like, why can't they just solve everything? Well, it's because that's not in their DNA to be solving everything. And they have too much they need to invest to make it happen. So the big companies have that problem, and they will be, like Brad was saying, they will be the ones who end up buying companies like Dimensional Energy. Air Company is a little different with the vodka versus say the jet fuel, but there are elements there that they will be licensing or purchasing one day. So yeah, I mean that's part of it. How do you pick the winners? I think it's by understanding. It's founder focus first, I'd say. Listening to these guys, they know what they're talking about. How do you find them? It's largely network based. So growing a network within the startups themselves, so the founders introducing you to other founders, within the venture community itself, and so investors introducing you to companies and to other investors, and then accelerators and incubators. Those are other areas. So there are basically companies out there that are helping companies like Dimensional and Air Company to focus and grow at the early stages of their life cycles. So knowing them and getting involved with them. The Yale community is very helpful as well. So if anyone is looking to invest in the space or looking to do anything in the space, leverage the Yale community, talk to any of us on the panel, and go out and try and figure out how to get there. But I'd say there's that, and then there's the analytical component. You have to make sure that you're doing your homework, that you know what the technologies are. The thing with early stage investing is, as Gautam, you would know, is a lot of times the companies in these early stages start doing one thing, and then they pivot and do something entirely different a few years later because they realize that what they started doing isn't working. So that's where the founder focus is important. So, I mean, I know some funds that their diligence process, once they have a thesis and they find a company they like, is just to do references on the founders. And they'll do 20 references on the founders and talk to the professors. They'll talk to the colleagues. They'll talk to the classmates. They'll talk to the families even. I know one investor who will meet with the parents of the founder of a company just to make sure, and with the founder at the dinner table, to make sure that they get along, which is wild to me. But that founder focus is very important.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that person would make it out alive with my parents, even though they're in their 80s. But that's another story. So I want to be mindful of time, and I think we've at least had one question come in so far, and would love to kind of open this to the group. I guess the question is, and this sort of speaks a little bit to what I was speaking with the three of you earlier today about the market coming down. Part of the value of Wendy and my having been, graduated from college decades ago, is that we've experienced multiple business cycles, economic cycles. There was a whole big crush when Obama came in to invest in clean tech and climate back in 2000, in the mid 2000s, and that all came crashing down, ended in tears. An MIT study said that of the $25 billion that venture capitalists put into climate and clean tech, half of it was lost. So for every dollar that venture capitalists invested, they managed to pull out 50 cents, which is not, it's even worse than going to the slots in Vegas by far. With the market coming down substantially, with the, you all have mentioned kind of the value of government support and regulation, but we see the teetering of American policy away potentially from supporting climate. Even the Supreme Court, in their wisdom, are talking about possibly removing the ability of the EPA to regulate carbon. So if we're facing these headwinds, and I think about the people who've joined us for this afternoon or this evening's call, and people I assume have either an interest in getting into working on climate and sustainability, or they are already in the space and looking to be more successful. What's your advice for dealing with what could be a big turning upside down of what had been a few solid years of ESG and climate? And Brad, I'll let you go first, because you've been good first in the rotation for the other questions.
Yeah, I mean, you painted a pretty gloomy picture for something that we are always trying to stay optimistic about. I mean, every time that there's a huge influx of money, some of that money will go to companies that had a good plan, and at some point, money will go into companies that didn't have a good plan. So I guess it's all about choosing the right companies. Of course, Airco and Dimensional Energy are two of the leaders in the area. And then the key is basically when people get their money during this big influx, is that they are able to develop that plan. So in reality, it comes down to me and staff making sure that our technologies, when the money comes in, are ready to scale, are ready to basically come out of the R&D stage and move into a commercialization phase, which means that they've got the scaling, they've got the integration, they've got their partners, they've got stuff lined up so that they're ready to go. And companies shouldn't ask for money, lots and lots of money, until they're ready to go, and investors shouldn't give them tons of money until they're ready to go. So really, it's like knowing when it's time to break out of the mold and go start building plants and getting revenue. So, all of our businesses, like, we hope that we will prove out our technology. For instance, in Tucson, Arizona, we're this summer going to be taking carbon dioxide, reacting it with our hydrogen from our electrolyzer, and we'll be making, high grade waxes on site, like the full demonstration of our technology, start to finish. And then we'll be, sending those out to be refined into the products that we'll send out to our partners that are interested in purchasing from us, right? Once that's proven, we'll be able to get our influx of money and scale. And so that's how we're going to be overcoming, I guess, some of the ups and downs. The market prices for us, the most relevant ones are what our electricity price is going to be based on the market. And if a market tanks, it usually means electricity prices also go down. And then it's oil prices, like how much are the things that we're replacing. Right now, aviation fuel is like $6 a gallon, which is double what it was a couple of years ago. So our, in that way, our technology looks, better, easier to commercialize. So, but again, that price is going to go back down probably at some point. So we just have to keep our eye on the ball and keeping everything as, as cheap as possible for our product so that we can actually make a profit.
Steph, what's your view? And I think maybe even if you're coming into the climate world and looking to so maybe building on Brad's point, right? You just have this sort of this view of having really good technology, but then how do you, as somebody who's interviewing, right? How do you you're interviewing at all these different companies, or you're talking to different companies, or looking to switch careers. How would you kind of look at this and say, okay, how do you get yourself comfortable that you're not going to be in that set of venture capital investments that went to zero?
So I think a big part of it is, Brad put it very well, like investing in the business models that worked. Remember, Tesla was around for Clean Tech 1.02, and they survived, and now they're doing pretty well. And I think one of the reasons why they were doing pretty well is because they got out like the Roadster, they got out some early proof of concept, that their approach worked, that their technology worked. And we're not to say that we're copycatting Tesla, but that we're trying to do our best to copycat Tesla. That we're this round that we raised, the 30 million Series A that we just raised, really that is just to get our production of our consumer good / high purity commodity ethanol, up to a point where it essentially sustains itself. And if we run into a downturn, it's something we can fall back on, because I guess the good news about being in the good news about being in the booze industry is that, when the economy goes up, people buy booze to celebrate. When the economy goes down, people buy booze to forget. I think we're spending this Series A money essentially on a much larger plant that is going to be able to, that's going to be really a small commercial sized plant, bigger than the pilot plant that we currently operate. We have the two pilot plants that we currently operate. I would say that, every business is going to have their own unique strategy to get through a bubble. At Tesla, I kind of I've obviously studied Tesla's strategy to make it through Clean Tech 1.0 and kind of, some of those associated challenges. But I think, and there's probably, as I mentioned, there's probably the people that know how Amazon weathered, the Web 1.0 tech bubble, way better than I do. And it was a different, and they didn't have a Roadster, so it was a different strategy from Tesla. So we all have, I would say that, both Brad's company and my company have our strategies for weathering, weathering a potential storm ahead. And I would say for people that are interested in working, in working in this sort of thing and helping in that sort of thing, helping climate tech companies, overcome those sorts of challenges, I would really say, the best way, I think, for people that, especially people that are in kind of like the Yale network, is to reach out to their network and reach out to the people that they know. I would say, I wouldn't give that advice to everybody, but I would say that, I mean, Yale has a very robust network, especially when it comes to sustainability and sustainable technologies. So I think for this audience, that makes the most sense. And I would also caution that one word of caution that we try to steer clear of is, there's been a handful of climate tech unicorns out there, that are commanding 9-figure valuations. And I talk about this. This is a frequent topic of conversation with me and Jason, Brad's boss. That they're trying to command insane, greater than $1 billion valuations without having any products. There's several examples that I can point to on that one. Some private, some public, and I would just say that I would be cautious of those of those businesses, because those are the ones that I feel are more bubbly than a lot of the companies that are in kind of that are in earlier, well, I wouldn't necessarily even say earlier stages, but that are not chasing after those really high market driven valuations.
Great. All right. So I see Wendy is waiting patiently. So Eric, you get to give a 5 to 8 word answer for that question. If you're getting into the industry, you're looking to make your way. This is the not even the elevator pitch, the escalator pitch.
As if you're trying to get in the energy. I mean, I get this question all the time. I got it earlier today, even from a former CEO of a refiner, which he wants to transition industries. So how do you do it? You network your way there. I mean, that's the only way to do it, I think. I mean, he asked me, is there a database I can go to see all the people that are involved in like the sustainability space and just start talking to people? And I was like, well, there's a lot of different databases, I guess, but yeah, you just find the people and you keep talking and you'll get there.
Great, thank you. All right, Wendy, I'll leave it to you to take 4 minutes to flesh out questions, address questions and answers. And before we do, I don't know if Wendy, you've had a chance to share it, but I wanted to volunteer. I'm happy to share my contact information. I would invite the panelists to do so as well with this group if people want to get in touch. I'm sure there are many things we can follow up on.
Yeah, and so I would ask each of you, if our speakers, including Gautam, if you feel comfortable doing so, please drop your name and contact information and or LinkedIn into the chat so that, and please mark it as for everyone so that everybody can see that. And so that way, everybody who is viewing this event, they can get in touch with you and follow up. What I'd like to do, there are some great questions that came in via chat and in the Q&A boxes. I'm going to just choose one. And I'd like each of you to, Brad, Steph, and Eric, I'd like each of you to address this question as concisely as possible. And then we'll probably just go a few minutes over past the hour. What is the biggest challenge that each of you are currently facing? I'm going to start with Brad. Concise, please.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest challenges that we're facing are going to be scaling integration. So taking something that is done on a certain scale and making it 1,000 times larger. The engineering that goes into that is excessive. The financial models that have to be used to make that work out are also complex. And then at that point, you're making a lot of product. Where is it going to go? What's your sort of revenue stream going to look like? Profit potential, and where do you go from there? So like the valley of death is going from a smaller scale to a large scale, but you have to go somewhere in between in order to prove out the technology as you scale. So we're going to be doing that the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Steph.
Yeah, I would say our biggest challenge is maintaining and improving efficiency as you matching those economies of scale that you read on paper. In the oil and gas industry, it took a long time to get to the level of economy of scale that like large reactions like Fischer-Tropsch and things like that currently get. And we need to get there a lot faster just because there's not enough time with climate change happening at the rate that it's happening. So I would say that our biggest challenge, and probably one of the bigger technical challenges for the entire field, is that matching the promise of economy of scale. It's very similar to what Brad was saying, and that scale up is the challenge. But I mean, like, scale up broadly is the challenge for the entire field. But more specifically, it's making sure that as we scale, the economies of scale kick in the way that we believe that they should, or the way that our engineering models and our math, making sure that the math we're doing on using software and Excel sheets actually comes true in reality.
Thank you, Steph. Eric, and then G.
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it for us is time and money. There's not enough time to evaluate all the companies that you want to be evaluating, and there's so many good companies out there. There's not enough money to be investing in all of them. And at the same time, you have to split that time that you're putting into evaluating companies and sourcing and evaluating companies and making investment decisions in that regard to raising capital so that you have the money to be able to deploy and to invest in the companies. So finding the time to do all those things is challenging, and having the money to invest in everything that you want is also challenging.
Thank you. G, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges in the industry, or in the field rather?
Yeah, I mean, thank you. It's interesting because this is where that grounding in WISAC and recycling and all that stuff back in the day kind of informs my view, which is there's a time crunch that we're dealing with, and it's very different. It's actually a very challenging time crunch because the window for dealing with the 2 trillion tons of emissions we put into the carbon emissions we put into the air, and in excess carbon emissions, and the 40 billion tons we're putting out every year, we're running out of time very, very quickly to be able to handle the amount of greenhouse gas impact we've created as a society. And so I think the big challenge is, how do we collectively address this quickly enough to make an impact, right? So Steph and Brad are working on really cool companies, and there's so many others that Eric is investing in that I've seen. But everything takes time to build, especially when you're building things, not software. And so how do you get that traction? How do you get that scale, given the size of the problem and the rapidly shrinking time we have to work with it?
Thank you, Jay. So we're going to end here. We're just a minute or two over. I want to first thank our speakers this evening, Brad, Steph, and Eric, for joining the Accelerate Yale community this evening to share your insights on the decarbonization field. Super interesting. Thank you for all of the work that you're doing. And Gautam, thank you so much for moderating this evening, fighting the traffic to still be here to moderate. Really appreciate that. And I also wanted to thank YAA Shared Interest Groups, without whom this Zoom recording would not be possible. We always borrow their account. One quick thing before I let all of you go, I just want to remind everyone that we are holding our next pitch competition on June 22nd at 6 p.m. Eastern. We encourage all Yale undergraduates, graduate students, and alumni to submit an application for that pitch competition by May 25th at midnight Eastern. May 25th at midnight Eastern. You can find the criteria and the application form at yaleangels.org. That is May 25th, and you got to be in it to win it. So get those applications in. We can't wait to see what comes in. Don't forget, there's a prize of $10,000. That is grant money, beautiful grant money for you, pre-seed or seed stage company out there. You must be a for-profit enterprise, okay? If you have any questions, if you want to sponsor, or if you want to volunteer pro bono services to our 5 finalists, please get in touch with us at team. That would be team@accelerate.yale.org. That's team@accelerate.yale.org. You can also just go to our website and find our email address. Would love to have additional sponsors, as well as people who want to volunteer their pro bono services to our finalists. So just remember, May 25th at midnight is the deadline to submit your application. Thank you so much, everybody. A recording of this webinar will appear on our YouTube and on our socials at LinkedIn and on our Facebook page, and to everybody who registered for this event. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a great evening. See you later.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.